Hi, everybody. Welcome. Excited to have you joining this afternoon for Eating California. As we have folks joining the webinar, we'd love to hear from you, a little introduction. If you want to type your name and where you're joining us from, and if you're representing an organization, into the chat box. We'd love to see where folks are joining from today. So welcome everybody to Eating California.
Sorry about getting started late. We
Yeah,
had a little power outage issue, but we're ready to roll.
yeah, I had a power outage right at 1:50. I was like, oh great. But power's back on, so we're on. So thanks everybody for being here this afternoon. While we're waiting for folks to join the webinar, if you want to type a little introduction in the chat box, let us know your name, where you're joining us from, and if you're representing an organization. We'd love to hear from you all. And we're gonna get started. So welcome to Eating California. My name is Celeste Gasparic, and I'm the Training Institute Manager with Community Nature Connection. So thanks so much for being here this afternoon. This webinar is part of Community Nature Connections Training Institute, which is a program that's part of our efforts to increase access to the outdoors for underrepresented communities. And through the Training Institute, we're trying to increase access to training opportunities related to the outdoor field. So excited to have everybody joining us this afternoon. And throughout the webinar, we're gonna be taking questions. So you can use the Q&A box to submit your questions. And we'll answer those throughout the presentation, and then we'll stick around for a little bit afterwards and get to any that we may have missed. So it is my pleasure to introduce Antonio Sanchez this afternoon, who's going to be leading us in the webinar. So welcome, Antonio.
Hey, how's it going, Celeste? We made it, right?
Yeah.
We made it. Cool. So thanks, Celeste. This is, I think, my second Zoom webinar. So if I'm looking at the wrong camera, if I'm looking off into space, there's not something more interesting. Actually, there may be something more interesting over there, but I'm paying attention here. I love giving this class, so I'm excited. I have no idea how many people are watching. Is it 1 or 50? Who knows? It might just be me and Celeste, but we're gonna give it, let's just pretend like it's a $100 class and we have $100 people registered. So me and Celeste are gonna take the profits and go have an awesome dinner, socially distanced after this. So thank you guys so much for showing up. Before I get started, I want to let you all know that this PowerPoint presentation is available. I'm sending it to Celeste. So if you guys have any questions, if I'm talking too fast, if you don't want to take notes, et cetera, I'm more than happy to share this with you. Celeste can give this to you. I have some recipe cards too for some native foods that Celeste can share with you as well. Just let Celeste know that you'd like either the recipe or the PowerPoint or both, and then she'll get them to you. I believe that's free with the price of admission, right, Celeste? And her microphone's off. She normally would have said, yes, it's free, Antonio. And
It's free.
she would have said they paid $50, so they get all this free stuff included. So I want to give thanks to a good friend of mine, Dr. Naomi Fraga, who works for the Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. Now it's called the California Botanic Garden. I think that's the new name. Her and I developed this PowerPoint, and by develop, I mean I watched while she did all of this PowerPoint. She's really a lot more proficient than I am at PowerPoints, but we collaborated together when I got to work at Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden in Claremont. This is probably the 25th, maybe 30th time that I've given this class. I love giving this class. I adore this class. This is an intro into native foods, California native foods, what we consider Alta California, from the border from San Diego out to Nevada, Reno, Las Vegas, up Sacramento, up to the border of Oregon. I hope you guys have fun. Please feel free to ask any questions. There's no bad questions. Actually, that's not true. There's a whole bunch of really bad questions, but you guys probably want to ask them. Feel free to ask any questions through the chat. I'd be happy to answer them as we go along. Celeste will let me know. So without further ado, let's get started. So here's the schedule for today's talk. We're going to take about an hour to talk about, I usually ask people why they're here. I would love to hear through chat what you guys want to get out of this class, what you're expecting out of this class, what food you could use in your diet, what you can do with the acorns in your house if you have an oak, etc. I would love to hear all that because that helps me as I go forward fine tune this class. So any questions you have, please feel free to type them in. I'm going to go over a quick history on the, or a quick overview on the history of foods of the Americas, both North and South America and Central America as well. And then the real meat and potatoes of the talk is introducing you all, if you don't know, some very easy to use California native plants as food in your everyday diet. And then after that, we're going to get a little bit more, not necessarily experimental, but we're going to get a little bit more hardcore into the stuff that you may want to experiment and work with. They're a little bit harder to use for whatever reason, and I'll explain why as we go forward in your diets. Again, feel free to chat any questions. My email is right at the bottom there, antoniosanchez@samuelfund.org. Oops. And before I begin the official lecture, I want to definitely give thanks to Naomi Fraga, my good friends at the Chia Cafe, who are an amazing small group of folks who are doing excellent work with native communities and native plants here in Southern California and furthering and promoting their use. I encourage you all to look them up. And I want to dedicate this talk to a good friend of many of ours who are in the native food community, in the native plant community, Jessica Orozco, who's a good friend of ours who passed away recently. And most importantly, the California native people who developed most of this knowledge and have generously passed a lot of it on to those of us who are here now, including themselves and their relatives. They're truly the first botanists, ecologists, and horticulturists of California, so we get to learn a lot from them. So this class, when I talk about the specific plants that I think are excellent for you guys to use, I'm going to be talking about, plant. I'll have the name. This is what the slides look like. So there's miner's lettuce, that's the common name. And then we'll have the scientific name, Claytonia perfoliata, very fancy sounding. It's just a way to make it sound super fancy, but we're talking about miner's lettuce. And then we'll have some descriptions about the plant. I'll give you some personal experience that I have with the plant, how you might grow it in your garden. Again, if I go too fast, we have this as a PDF that you guys can get for free from Celeste. And I'd be happy to take any questions like, oh, how did he say you could use that plant? Or how does he use it or what? Go ahead and chat those questions and I'll try to get them answered. So just a quick overview of what it is to live in California. If you guys haven't grown native California plants before, a lot of what we know as California, where most of the population lives in California, is in a Mediterranean climate, which is really cool because there's not that many places in the world that are Mediterranean climates, right? If you look at the map here, all the red spots are Mediterranean spots. California, the Mediterranean, where if we think about it, we get rosemary, lavender. Central Chile, we have Chilean guava. There's calendrinia, which is used extensively for landscaping. It's a beautiful pink flowered succulent. The Cape of South Africa gives us aloes and all sorts of amazing stuff. And Southern Australia has kangaroo paws, eucalyptus, all sorts of cool stuff that actually a lot of those plants are very easy to grow here in California, and a lot of them actually become weeds too. So we may need to be careful about what we're promoting as far as growing in our landscapes. And usually when I give this class in front of folks, which I like doing a lot more, but I love doing for you guys today. I have folks raise their hand and say, how many folks here have heard of arugula? And usually, if there's 30 people taking the class, 29 raise their hand. And the only reason the other person doesn't raise their hand is because they already fell asleep, because that's how boring this class is. So,
Antonio,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt.
that's all good.
We're seeing the miner's lettuce up right now, not the map.
Okay, you're seeing miner's lettuce? Oh, let's see. You're paused. Resume share. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay, let's see. Paused. I wonder, this is where we might have to get some of those Silicon Valley people in. How do I unpause this sharing? Let me see.
You could try to
How's that?
stop sharing and then start sharing over again.
Okay, let's see. Stop share. Oh, I need a shave. And sorry about this, folks. As you can tell, I'm not super up to date with, are we back on the
Now
miner's
I can
lettuce?
see, yeah, now I can see the information about miner's lettuce.
Okay, oh, for some reason it's paused right there. We're on Mediterranean regions of the world,
Yep,
and then now we're at arugula.
yep.
Okay, cool. Okay, we're back on board. Okay, sorry about that. So I usually ask how many people have heard of arugula, and most people say yes. Everyone who doesn't say yes is either asleep or asleep. And then I ask, just think about 20 or 30 years ago where you were. And a lot of people haven't even been born in these classes 20 or 30 years ago. But if they were, how many folks had heard of arugula? And it drops, the number of people who have heard of arugula drops 20 or 30 years ago in the year 2000 or even 1990. And then I think part of the reason is because arugula has been around probably for thousands of years, but it's really only been used in what we know as the United States on a large basis, right? Available to most communities as far as being available in most supermarkets, really for the last 10 or 20 years. So we know that arugula is native to the Mediterranean, and a lot of folks, maybe from Spain, Italy, France, Turkey, areas like that, know arugula. It's native to there. It's part of that cuisine. It's probably been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years there. And we can draw the comparison to another Mediterranean area, just like South Africa. And there's a tea, and I'm going to slaughter the name, but I'm going to try to say it. It's Rooibos or Arugula. I tried it one time. It was pretty good, but I don't really drink it. But we do know that most folks, I asked the same question, have folks ever tried that tea? And a few folks have. And then we go back 20 or 30 years. Has anybody ever tried that tea 20 or 30 years ago? And the numbers dropped. Very few, if any, people have tried that tea. And if they had, most of them have ties to South Africa. So what we're seeing is a lot of these plants have been around, obviously, for hundreds, not thousands of years. And a lot of times it's the cultures that they're tied to. They get to pass them on, right? So there's another example, Chilean guava. I love as a landscape plant, Chilean guava. It's a beautiful small shrub, and it produces a tiny, slightly smaller than the size of a cranberry fruit, delicious fruit, low water, non-invasive. Highly recommend it for folks who are doing like permaculture or low water gardening. But again, from a Mediterranean landscape. And then Australia, they have a whole bush food movement that is drawing off of foods that folks have been eating there for thousands of years. So there's all sorts of amazing things going on in the Mediterranean regions of the world. And then we can look at something like quinoa, and we can ask how many folks that are in this workshop right now have heard of quinoa, and almost everyone has heard of quinoa. And then we ask 20 or 30 years ago, how many folks have heard of quinoa? And if you had, in the year 2000 or 1990, usually you were either Central American, South American, or you had ties there. You maybe had visited there or lived there for a while, right? So we know that just like goji berry, from I believe that's China. I'm not really good on my geography. But all these foods have been growing and been used by cultures for lots of years. And we're fortunate that they get to be passed on, to all of us. And so let's look at what the Americas currently offers on a large scale to what we know as as the world, right? Or even just our diets. If we look at North America, we have blueberry, grapes, cranberries, pecans, sunflowers, and strawberries, which is really cool. But then if we add Mesoamerica, which is basically central Mexico, going down into Central America, and then into parts of South America, we have avocado, beans, chocolate, corn, papaya. These are all foods that folks who are taking this class right now probably have eaten either this week or will eat at least one of the foods on that list. But the sad thing is that if we look at California being the state with the most diversity for plants, so almost just by default, we have the most plants here in the state of California. So it's almost like we should have at least one or two representatives, if not way more, in our common everyday diet here in the United States. And there's very few representatives from California plants in our diets. And what we do have represented is almost like half, right? And the reason I say half is because there are some wine grapes that take, and this is back more 50, 100 years ago, that they would take the native Vitis californica, which is the California wild grape, and they would take the rootstock and then graft on top of it maybe a French wine grape or a grape from Europe. And they like the drought tolerance and the disease resistance of the grape, of the California grape, but they weren't necessarily using the California grape for its flavor. And we see the same thing happen with native walnuts, and we see the same thing happen with our strawberries, that we don't necessarily eat them cultivated in their pure form. We kind of have them hybridized and kind of mixed up to help local farmers, which is great, which is great, but we're not really tasting California, right? And so why is that? And this is a huge topic, huge discussion for like an 18-day PowerPoint presentation. But if we look at Mexico and what happened to Mexico when Europeans came over, a lot of Mexico, the native folks in Mexico, for lack of a better term right now, kind of became Mexican, right? So they took their tortillas with corn, and wheat was incorporated, and now we have corn tortillas and wheat tortillas. There's obviously a lot of violence, a lot of destruction that we won't get into in this PowerPoint, but a lot of the Mexican native cultures and the foods and the languages were somewhat preserved, and you can see that to this day with avocados, with tacos, with matachines in Catholic dances in December. There's a lot of native cultures that are blended up in Mexico. And if we look at California, unfortunately, it's almost the opposite that happened. By some accounts, over 90% of native folks were just completely decimated and killed and passed away. And there are strong native communities still here in California. But what happens when you lose 90% of your group is that inevitably, and you get kicked off your land and you have no access to food and to hunting areas and all these things that take hundreds of years, if not thousands of years to develop, it starts to be fragmented, right? And so unfortunately, a lot of those things were broken apart, and many native folks these days are trying to put them back together. And it's a beautiful thing that's happening with native food. But there was a lot of knowledge, unfortunately, that was just lost and so shattered that it's hard to kind of put back together. So let's talk about our beautiful state of California. Let's get to some facts. And these are straight stolen off of Wikipedia. I don't wake up knowing this stuff. So over 6,500 plants found in California, which is amazing. California is #1 for diversity in all of the United States. And the cool thing is that a third of those plants, so over 2,000 of those plants, are only found in California. Maybe some folks have taken seed in some of those plants and they grow them in other parts of the world now, but naturally, originally, those plants only occurred in California, which is amazing. So you could go back 500-600 years, and if an earthquake, God forbid, had taken California off the map and it just disappeared, we would have lost the whole world would have lost over 2,000 species of plants. And who knows what beautiful stuff was going on with those plants as far as food, medicine, fiber, fuel, pollinators, all sorts of stuff. So it's super important for me and the work that I do, and that we conserve as many native plants and as many intact habitats as we can. And so why would we even promote, if we're trying to if we're trying to protect native habitats, why would we even promote eating native foods? And this is a long discussion too, but I just want to say, I think I just left the camera for a second. I just want to say that I'm promoting, and Dr. Naomi Fraga and many of us who do native food work, we're promoting the use of native plants ethically, and we want to use them in our own gardens. If you don't have a house, maybe you live in an apartment, you can do some of this stuff in pots. If you can't do stuff in pots, if you can afford it, you can buy some of these things. You can do it in a community garden. There are many ways that these things can be done. So you don't have to have a huge garden to start, and a lot of money to start incorporating some of this stuff into your diet. And that's what this talk is about. How can we easily start eating California? And just a quick note on foraging, which foraging, I guess, is kind of a term for going to the wild and collecting stuff. And I do not work for the National Park Service, but I'm a partner with the National Park Service, and we in no way condone people coming to the national parks and taking plants or plant material from the national parks, whether it's invasive plants like mustard or native plants like elderberry. But there are areas, private land, maybe you know the owner, that if you secure rights that you could definitely go out and harvest. But what we're promoting here today is how you can do this in your own garden, ethically, on your own, low cost. Almost everyone can do it, right? So before I jump into the plants, let me introduce a website that some of you may know that I'm going to use a lot during this talk. It's called CalFlora. So on the right hand of your screen there, you're going to see a picture of California, all the counties, and then all these beautiful little blue dots. And all those blue dots, for the most part, represent where the plant that I'm talking about occurs in the wild, right? So on the left, there's a beautiful picture of miner's lettuce. And I love miner's lettuce. It's the first native food I'm going to talk about. And you can see that it grows almost everywhere in California. And for those of you who are new to native plant growing, native plant horticulture, native plant gardening, or for those of you that are just horrible at it, which is a lot of us, if you see that a plant grows in a wide distribution or is found all over California, like miner's lettuce, that's usually a good representation or a good signal to you that it's going to be easy to grow in your garden. So if you've had trouble with maybe a ceanothus or a manzanita that we won't really talk about today, but if you have in the past had trouble with the manzanita or ceanothus, maybe you want to look at where that manzanita or ceanothus were from. Maybe it was from upper elevation, 6,000 feet, past Yosemite, and you're trying to grow it in Southern California, Pasadena, with much less water and much more heat. So just a few tips. And then so as we look at the CalFlora website on the left, I want to give you an example of what's super wide ranging, like we said, the miner's lettuce, and then something that you find in a very small area of California, which would be something like Nevin's barberry, right? Or Berberis nevinii, which is on this list for food because I love that fruit. It's an excellent fruit. And in a few terms I may or may not touch on, but I just want to let you guys know some of the ideas that some of us native food people talk about and horticulturists talk about. When we talk about a plant being adaptable, we mean it's very easy to grow. It can grow in clay soil, it can grow in sand, it can grow in just a bunch of different environments, right? When we talk about wide-ranging species, almost the same thing. It's a species plant, maybe like the miner's lettuce, that we can see growing by the coast. We can see it growing inland. I'm going to talk a little bit about cultivars, and that's just a fancy term for a specific plant that we usually give a fancy name to. And probably one of the most famous cultivars for food is a Roma tomato or a navel orange. And those are all basically the same plant. We know what to expect out of the Roma tomato, right? We know that that's a good canning, a good sauce tomato. We know what to expect out of the navel orange. It's a good juice orange. So I'm going to use some names of cultivars, and those are really good for what I'm recommending for food. Hybrids, there's a few hybrids on my list, and a hybrid is basically two species that have gotten together, maybe had some wine, And after the sun went down, they had babies. Black sage, Cleveland sage got together and they produce a hybrid. And a lot of times they aren't the strongest plants in the wild, but sometimes in the garden, they're really, really useful for us. So I'll talk about that more when we get to them. Seed strain is more for annuals. You'll see a lot of annuals like Roma tomatoes, like different types of lettuces. Land race is even a more localized seed strain, like a Chimayo chili from Chimayo in New Mexico, or Nambe chili from Nambe, which is just 10, 15 miles away from Chimayo, but they have their own strains of almost the exact same chile. And a California native plant, to me, is just a California plant found here in California that we know grew here before Europeans came, and that has some genetics of California native plants in it. And then an interesting idea that I talk about sometimes, and that some of us talk about, is some of the lost plants from California. Some of the cultivars or the woodlands that native folks used to, and some of them probably still do go to, right? With black oaks that are tastier, producing bigger acorns, berberis or barberry that produce bigger fruits, sweeter fruits, etc. These are things that are developed over decades, if not hundreds of years. And it's something, an idea that we'd like to get back to. So right before I jump into the food or the plant part, real quick, I'm going to check in with Celeste. How are we doing? Is there any questions that I might be able to answer right now, Celeste, or we want to keep going?
So when I got kicked off briefly, I lost the Q&A history. So I asked if I asked.
Uh-oh, she's freezing up. I'm going to assume that she has Cricket Wireless like I do, and that her Wi-Fi is horrible like mine is. But I'm at a government facility right now, so mine is spotless and amazing. She's frozen. I'm just gonna keep going like this is cool. Give me the mic and I'm gonna freestyle. So let's talk about 10 plants that you can use in your diet this week, this month, or this year. Please keep the questions coming, even though Celeste sounds like she's losing them all. She's just hitting delete on them. But I will give you my email afterwards. Feel free to email me any questions you have. I love questions. I love all the feedback. I would love to hear from you guys. So the more questions, the better. And I don't have the answers to everything, but I'll try to get you guys the answers. So let's go ahead and jump into foods. So the first one, like I said, is going to be miner's lettuce. This is the only annual that I'll talk about. An annual is a plant typically that you throw the seed down, or you throw the plant in, and within 60, 90, 120 days, normally it'll grow leaves, it'll flower, it'll produce seed, and then it's dead, right? Lettuce, spinach, most basils, these are all annuals. And that's why we usually, when we're going to a nursery, we buy them sometimes in 6-packs, like we would our beer. And we plant them, they grow quick, and then they're gone. Maybe like marigolds, the flowers. So miner's lettuce is an excellent, excellent edible. It's a great, great native plant to grow in your garden. I just want to caution you guys to always grow this one by seed. It's kind of hard to transplant for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. Just trust me, I've had a hard time transplanting it. Much easier to grow by seed. This grows, as you saw on the map, everywhere here in California. It actually grows, I believe, across the world, if not way past the borders of California in the United States. It's an awesome plant, really, really easy to eat. What happens in the wild is the seed sits there during the summer, and the rains come and the seeds wake up almost with the first rains. And you'll see them start to pop out November, December. And if you're going for a hike, if you're lucky enough to be close enough to an area where you can go for a hike, or if you put them and seed them in your garden, you'll see them start to pop up around December. And when you see this, the leaves come out, they're delicious. And it's a plant that acts like lettuce, acts like spinach. I used to do farming, and there's a term in farming called cut and come again, which means you can cut the leaves off, not rip them off, but you can cut them off, and the plant will keep producing leaves, right? There's a limit. You can't cut it for 18 years and it'll keep, right? There's a limit, but it's a really, really good intro to eating native foods. It's very soft, delicate flavor. I don't know of anyone who complains about the flavor except after it's flowered, because the plant's not really trying to produce these lush leaves anymore. It's trying to produce these hard stems so it can make flowers and seed. It's trying to go to sleep, so it can produce seed for the next generation. Super easy to grow in the wild. Grows by oak trees, in shade, in part shade, very rarely in full sun. The best place to put it in your garden is an area when it rains. You know, let's say it rains on a Monday, you come out on a Tuesday, and if it's completely dry, that's probably not a good place for miner's lettuce. If it rains on Monday and you come out on Friday and there's still water there, that's a good place for miner's lettuce, right? So the part shade areas where the water kind of hangs out for a little bit is excellent for it. And I love doing this in raised beds, in small rows. If you're doing tomatoes, eggplants, chiles, this time of year, maybe you put your chile 12 inches apart or 18 inches apart, and there's a lot of naked, bare soil in the meantime. It's a perfect place to seed your miner's lettuce because it's going to be wet anyways. You're going to be watering that area, and it can grow in. By the time the chiles and the tomatoes get big enough, the miner's lettuce is shaded, and so you can actually grow this into June and July. Whereas in the wild, if you go see this right now, it's dry. This guy is starting to set seed, and you can barely even find this. And this would be a survival food at this point right now, because those plants are probably gnarly if there's any leaf left over. But really easy to use leaf for salads, for soups, for pestos, etc. I love this plant. There's Celeste. Are you back, Celeste? She's unfrozen. Let's go to the second food, which is one that I use on a weekly basis. I love this plant. It's Hummingbird Sage, Salvia spathacea. You can see on the map where it occurs. It doesn't look like a super wide distribution, but it's wider than a lot of the sages that we use in landscaping. So it is a really easy to grow sage as far as native sages go. If you guys haven't grown hummingbird sage, it has this big leaf that gets maybe up to about 5-6 inches wide, depending on the year, depending on how much water there is, depending on your soil. This is a plant that in the wild, if you see it grow in January or February, you want it in your garden. It's gorgeous. It's in full flower. The hummingbirds love it. It smells amazing. It tastes amazing. And if you go back and you're in a hiking spot and you're trying to look for it in August or September, you can't even find it because it's gone completely dormant. But in your garden, it doesn't have to do that. If you water it every about 10 days, you give it some light water. And if anybody has specific irrigation questions, go ahead and ask them and I can try to address them. But normally, lightly irrigating about every 10 days, starting in May, keeps this plant evergreen and it never goes dormant, right? And so you have leaves all year. So the easiest way to use this is in honey or agave syrup. You can throw that in a food processor or a blender, and you can blend up 2 to 6 leaves, depending on how strong you like it. And you've got an amazing tasting syrup that's really easy to use on pancakes, on tortillas, in yogurt, whatever you want to use. And you can use it, super easy. Other ways that I've seen it used or that I've used it is, I've never used it in a cold tea, but I've used it as a hot tea. It's probably the easiest native plant we have to use as a tea, right? 2-3 leaves, depending on how big they are. Some almost boiling water, let it sit for about 5 minutes, and you've got a really good tasting tea that's semi-sweet. And a really cool way to use it, if anybody works for any fancy restaurants, you can cut the bigger leaves, throw a little oil in a pan, and you can fry this really quickly for about 20 or 30 seconds, turn it 2 or 3 times, pull it out once it's crisp, crack a little salt on top of it. You can charge $5 per leaf. It's really unique tasting, appetizer. So I love that plant. I highly recommend it. It grows underground by rhizome, so it's a really good one for pots, in wine barrels, or even smaller if you have to. Super easy to grow. The next plant on my list is one that I have a recipe for. If you guys ask Celeste for it, we'd be happy to share it with you. It's a plant that I use to make native pesto, native Cleveland sage pesto. So in front of you guys is Cleveland sage, which for some gardeners is really hard to grow. And if you look at where it occurs in the wild, so look at the CalFlora map, it's a very concentrated area. If you guys know that area of like Oceanside, Camp Pendleton, Cleveland National Forest, into Baja, very hot, very dry, 12 inches of rain a year, excellent drainage, which is hard to replicate in a lot of our gardens, right? In our gardens, we have flat clay soil. We have 20 inches of rain a year because we won't stop watering our plants. And a lot of people kill Cleveland sage really, really quick. So what happens if we take Cleveland sage and we mix it with purple sage, which is much easier to grow? You guys look at the map and you can see that purple sage doesn't just do San Diego County, it does Orange County, it does LA County, Ventura County, Santa Barbara County. It looks like in San Luis Obispo County too. There's a few stragglers up north, but we won't count those. Those are part of the family that are kicked out and just kind of hang out for Thanksgiving. They do Zoom conferences during Thanksgiving. I'm not sure if anybody's listening to this, so I might just start freestyling. But what we have in nursery trade is 2 sages that, again, had babies, had wine, the sun went down, and then babies came out. And a beautiful landscape plant called the Cleveland Sage Hybrids came out, and they're amazing for landscaping. There's a lot of landscapers that use it. Caltrans uses it. A lot of even like hospitals. I've seen in front of hospitals, in front of schools, usually under the names of Aromas, Allen Chickering, Pozo Blue, Whirly Blue. Those are the 4 most common. You can even find this at Home Depot or Lowe's, you know, if you're lucky, if they have it in stock. But at any garden center that sells natives, this is usually one of the natives that's there. It smells so good. It's an amazing combination of the Cleveland sage and the purple sage. Very easy to grow in your garden. And the way that I've used it, my favorite way to use it is a native sage pesto. And it only takes about 15 minutes. And I'm so sorry that we can't do this in person, because I would love to be with you guys to be able to offer you my Cleveland sage samples, because I don't think anyone's ever said no to it. Like I said, I've given this class 20, 30 times. Pretty much every time that I give this class, we do samples. We've had conferences where we've offered it to over 100 people, and people adore this. You can use either garlic or the native onion if you want to go extra hardcore native. But I strongly recommend this plant as a pollinator plant for bees and butterflies. It looks good in your garden, and it's really easy to use in cooking as a sage pesto. And then you can use the leaves as well to make sage ice cream. This sage is really easy to exchange for lavender. So if you have any recipes that you like to use lavender, either flower buds or leaves with, I would recommend that you try using this. Even something as simple as getting a bottle of olive oil and then dropping 5 or 10 of these leaves, right? And letting the leaves hang out in the olive oil, soaking up these leaves, and man, you can sell it to your neighbor for like 20 bucks, right? If your neighbor's a hipster. Depends on what kind of car they drive. How are we doing, Celeste? We still okay? I want to see if we have any questions I can address right now before I get too crazy.
I've been popping in and out, so I don't have any questions that I can see, unfortunately.
Okay. There's someone named Kaylee Bailey who raised her hand, and she says, how do I get a refund for this free class? Just kidding. So I'm sorry, guys. It looks like Celeste, again, she has Cricket Wireless like I do. I proudly have Cricket Wireless, and it's like she's breaking in and out. If we don't get to your questions because of our bad service, please feel free to email me, and I will give you way too much of my time. So let's go to the 4th one, which is Allium unifolium.
I have one question.
Oh, here we go. Go ahead.
That's coming in. Where can we find seeds for miner's lettuce?
That's a great question. So I'm not here to promote any business. The good thing is that there's not many businesses to promote. Well, the sad thing is that there's not many businesses to promote because just no one does this. It's a very hard business. I would check with Theodore Payne Foundation. They sell a lot of native seed. They may or may not have miner's lettuce. I do know that on a consistent basis, at the very end of my talk, I will have the name, but a seed company called Larner Seed, Larner. She's up north. She has miner's lettuce seed. That seed is from Northern California, so it depends on, there's different debates as to whether we should grow seed of plants from Northern California. With the plant that widespread, I'm not sure that it matters too much, but that may be something you want to consider. And the cool thing is, like I said, I run the nurseries. So maybe I didn't introduce myself, but I run the nursery and the seed collecting for the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Park. So we stretch from Agora Hills, Calabasas area to Malibu, Thousand Oaks, lots of cool places. And one initiative that we have started, and because of COVID, we're not announcing it so much, but once COVID kind of passes, is that we want to promote the use of native foods among our population, among our local people. And so we're going to start to give away seed, miner's lettuce, of the native chia, and live plants of golden currant, elderberry, and a few other ones that we've identified as native foods. So please catch my email address and email me, because once we feel it's safe for folks to come and do the transaction, we will definitely want to share our native foods with you guys, right? So hopefully that answers that question. So on to the next bulb. A bulb is just something, this is probably not scientific, but something that hangs out underground, right? Little round thing. And then when the time's right, it wakes up and it shoots above the ground. And in this case, it's the onion or the chives, and then it flowers, set seed, and then you could basically just tear that off and the bulb is still hanging out underground, falling asleep. With most of our native bulbs and our native corms, they wake up for about 3, maybe 5 months of the year, and then they're dormant, they're dry for the rest of the year. And so they're very hard to grow for native or for folks, because it's hard to keep areas dry. The one leaf onion, Allium unifolium, is super easy. In my experience, in other people's experience, it doesn't mind being wet all year. This doesn't mean that it's going to be green all year. It has its chive time and it has its flower time, which is exactly right now. So you could go out, if you're lucky, if you have this in your garden, and cut this as a chive, cut this as a flower right now, or maybe just a few weeks past. But it does act really well or behave really well with other garden plants that you water maybe once a week or every 14 days. And so it won't rot out like a lot of our other bulbs and corms. So I love this plant. If you want to get boring, you can just use it as a garnish. I use it in my native pesto. So native onion is one of the plants that we give away, right? That we're giving away. So I'd encourage you guys to hit me up to get some of these bulbs. We can use the green chives and you can use the flowers. They're all edible. Depending on which onion you get, some of them are spicier. Some of them aren't as spicy as garlic. The Allium unifolium, the one leaf onion, is a little bit less spicy than onion, so it's not as strong, but it does have a nice onion flavor. And it's really cool to use this in small dishes with like the native tritolea as a potato, this as the onion, and like a native potato and onion dish, right? I love this plant, very beautiful plant. If you're doing it in your garden, under oak trees, in part shade, next to hummingbird sage, you've got hummingbird sage for teas and honeys, and you've got the native onion growing right next to it. It's a gorgeous combination. The next one is a plant called honey mesquite that I'm not necessarily recommending that you all use in your garden. It grows like a weed out here. As long as you're not in that fog area, if you're really, really too close to that marine layer in Southern California, you might get some powdery mildew. But apart from that, as long as you get 75 degrees, 80 degrees of heat during the summer, this thing grows like a freaking weed. I love this plant. There's songs about this plant in Mexican and probably other cultures. A lot of you have probably used the wood for cooking, but what we're talking about is using the seed pod that looks kind of like a pea seed pod for food. And the reason I'm not recommending you grow this is because we just don't know enough, or maybe me personally, I don't know enough about where the limits are to produce tasty, tasty seed. I've done a lot of work in the Camarillo, Oxnard, Ventura area, and some work for about 4 years in the Pomona, Ontario, Claremont area, and I just have never found that there's enough either heat or soil or whatnot to produce tasty, tasty fruits. They do produce fruits, but they're just not any good. Not like you find in Vegas, not like you find 50 miles past Riverside, and not like you find in Tucson and Phoenix. So what I'm recommending, and what Chia Cafe, some friends of mine who have a great book on native food recommend, is that we go online and we buy this from either native sources or folks who are growing this ethically. One that comes to mind is Native Seed Search out of Tucson. They're harvesting ethically from the same plants, and they sell this flour. And again, I owe you guys, if we ever do this again, I invite you all. Actually, I hope not all of you, because it looks like there's like 50 or 60 people on this talk. I do not want to make cookies for all of you, but normally I make cookies for 20 or 30 people. I make mesquite cookies. We can make them vegan too. It's about a third mesquite, 2/3 maseca or cornmeal, a little bit of butter, or if you want to use vegan butter, pine nuts, a little chia, and you have like a power bar, right? It's an amazing cookie that tastes like corn and sweet because of the mesquite. That recipe is available to you guys. If you just ask Celeste, I'll be sending her the recipe cards, and it's an awesome, if you guys do field work, I do a lot of field work, right? I'm in the field sometimes for 8-10 hours. It's a super not heavy cookie that's just calories. If you guys go hiking, if you just have a hard, heavy job, or even if you're just a mom, dude, mom life sucks. So if you just want to eat 200 calories as a mom and just get you going, it's a very easy to eat, like basically old school power bar. Apart from that, we can use mesquite to do pancakes. There's a whole book on recipes for mesquite. You can make mesquite mole. Mesquite has a hint of chocolate. It's related to carob, if you guys have ever eaten carob, so it has a similar uses as carob. I am in no way a dietitian, so I'm just gonna read off my PowerPoint. It is low glycemic index, which from what I understand is excellent for folks who are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. And it just tastes good. We find it a lot of times in these superfood, like $20 smoothie mixes, but you guys should just buy the flour yourselves and make your own smoothie mixes. It's a very adaptable food. The only problem with it, if you want to call it a problem, is it doesn't have any gluten, so it doesn't raise, right? So it doesn't produce anything fluffy. So if you guys don't mind, you can find, you can cut it with flour to make those pancakes, or you can find a flour substitute to make it softer, right? But an awesome, awesome food that we should be using. Low water, mesquites, there's millions of these trees between here and Phoenix that we should be using the food of, right? A very sustainable source of food. Next one, let's get to some fruit. Everybody loves fruit, so let's talk about native fruits. This is Vitis californica. This is California wild grape, which is everywhere in California. You can see the distribution. Very easy to grow. The fruit is actually pretty good. 1 out of 10. It's maybe like a 6 off the vine, which is pretty cool for a wild fruit. If you think about all the fruits that we eat on a regular basis, most of them are cultivated. Most of them are developed to be sweet. They're not naturally that sweet. And so for a plant to be like a 6 on the sweetness scale, just naturally is pretty good. And we can also look at another native grape, which is Vitis jordiana, or desert wild grape. And you guys can see the distribution. It's much more Southern California, going out into Nevada, and it reflects the name, right? So it's a more drought tolerant, heat resistant, or heat tolerant grape. I don't like the fruit on this one so much. I would say it's about a 3 to 5. If you guys have this, I would strongly recommend you wash these grapes before you eat them, not just because birds poop on them, but there's some sort of coat that I'm kind of thinking it's just this drought tolerance on this coat that is making it kind of hard to eat just straight off the vine. But if you wash it, no problem, it's all good. But what I'm interested in is a cultivar or a hybrid, right, called Rogers Red, which you guys might find in different native nurseries. You can buy it online if you'd like, or you can go to different nurseries to find it. This thing grows like a weed. I've seen it grow 10 to 20, maybe even 25 feet in 1 year. Don't be afraid of all that growth. If you guys have ever seen a vineyard, worked in a vineyard, or even grown grapes, you know that grapes can be cut back really hard to about 2 or 3 feet during the winter, right? So just because it grows 20 feet doesn't mean it's going to be 20 feet. We can cut it back very, very hard. So don't be afraid of using this to cover something up during the summer and then cut it back during the winter. Usually produce fruit within the first year or 2. Tons of fruit, really sweet fruit. They're slightly smaller than a Concord grape. They do have seeds in them, and I think they're similar in flavor to Concord grape. If you're doing a native garden and you absolutely have to have a fruit that's edible the first or second year, I would recommend this. This guy's really easy to grow, can tolerate full sun. They grow this in Phoenix, just to give you an idea of how much heat this can take. I've seen it grow in full shade. The only problem with full shade is that it doesn't produce as much fruit or any fruit. It needs at least some sun to produce fruit. So I highly recommend this plant. I love this plant. Super easy to grow. And then let's talk a little bit about blueberries. We don't, the blueberries that we eat on a normal basis that you guys might find like at the supermarket aren't from California, but the story of blueberries is very interesting. And just to be clear, Native folks have been eating blueberries from the eastern part of the United States for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So this story that I'm about to get into does not include any Native folks, and we know why. But that's not going to take away from the story, in that some folks, I forgot her name, so I'm going to go look it up real quick. There it is, Elizabeth White. In the East Coast, what state was it? I think it's like Delaware, Vermont, somewhere out there. She's really into plants. She really liked these blueberries, and she noticed that they were all different flavors, right? Different sizes, etc. So she got her neighbors hyped up, and she said, "Hey, neighbors, why don't you send me some of your cuttings?" Which is basically just a clone, right? Let's get some cuttings of your biggest, tastiest blueberries, and let's try to develop this. She worked with a very famous botanist named Colville, and they worked together to develop a blueberry that was bigger, sweeter, easy to grow in a farm setting, right? Like row crops. And within, I believe it's like 5-6 years, they had developed a bigger, sweeter, easier to do cuttings of, because we need to be able to do cutting of it as nursery people. It needs to be easy to grow too. We need to be able to replicate it by the thousands, if not tens of thousands. And they developed something pretty quickly. And so it is possible to redevelop some of these lost, what I call lost cultivars or hidden cultivars, right? And so for me, the easiest, the low-hanging fruit is Ribes aureum. I love this plant. Me and my kids ate this 4 or 5 days ago. This plant is phenomenal. It is sweet off the bush, and this is a wild plant that is undomesticated, uncultivated, producing a very sweet fruit, easy to harvest. And I believe there's a lot of work to be done as far as picking sweeter varieties, because you can be in the wild and you can find 5 or 10 plants of Ribes aureum, and they're all going to taste a little bit different. And you can tell which ones are the sweeter ones, right? So if you buy a Ribes aureum for your garden, you may not get a big harvest. And so I'm recommending for you that you plant at least 3. And this is one of the plants that we're giving away to encourage people to grow plants in their garden, to grow native food. And we're not just giving 1 away because you will get a very small harvest. We're giving 3 away, right? So please hit us up. We love this plant. This is all done from cuttings. We're trying to see which ones are the sweeter fruits. You can eat it fresh. Currants have been eaten by European folks for hundreds, not thousands of years. Same with native Californians and folks from the Americas. So we're just continuing a tradition, right? Easy to use as jams, in medicine, etc. And there's a ton of berries that we could use, that we could add to this list. I think the most interesting after golden currant is one called Vaccinium ovatum, or huckleberry. And a lot of folks who have been to Portland, spent time in Oregon, maybe from Vancouver, southern Canada, West Coast, or Washington, they know huckleberry. Huckleberry is a really tasty fruit related to blueberries, and really sweet, just straight off the plant, and in abundance out there in Washington, Vancouver, and Northern Oregon. But the really interesting part, if you guys look at this map with all these little yellow circles, you can see where huckleberry occurs in the wild. And there's 2 things that stand out on that map. It's all on the coast, right? It's all very coastal. So we're not getting that direct super heat from inland. And it starts to die off and not exist in abundance around San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara County. Supposedly, there's some populations in San Diego, and we know for sure there's a few populations on the Channel Islands. But apart from that, it kind of skips over LA and Orange County, which I'm not sure why that is. It may be it just got eradicated because there's so many people who live there. But either way, it starts to die off really significantly around San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara. It basically stops in Santa Barbara. There are a few places in San Diego and Channel Islands, but those are kind of the leftovers, right? Not to be disrespectful, but leftovers. But this plant we know has an industry, millions of dollar industry that people make pies out of, that people sell fresh. This we know is eaten on a yearly basis. But the interesting thing is the exact same plant that grows in Vancouver is the same plant that grows in San Diego. It's the same genetics, right? The same species. So there's work there to be done, whether it's developing a Vaccinium ovatum, which is huckleberry, more drought tolerant by forcing, right? Forcing the crossing of Southern California species with Northern or even Vancouver species, or crossing Vaccinium ovatum huckleberry with blueberries, right, which are vacciniums. There's work being done in Texas and in Florida with different vaccinium species being crossed. So there's so many different fruits that I think are just waiting to be used. They are used by people right now, but I think as water becomes more of a scarce resource, I think people may have a more interest in using. So it's a beautiful plant too. It's a great landscape plant, Vaccinium ovatum. Again, just like blueberries, we should plant at least 3. There's the fruit, really tasty, fairly easy to grow, much more easier to grow than blueberries. I know a lot of people have a hard time with blueberries, acidifying the soil, etc. This does like an acid soil, more acid than like our white sage and all that, but nothing compared to blueberries, right? We're not talking about peat moss and all that stuff. So very easy to use, fairly easy to grow, fairly low water, really cool plant. Mexican elderberry, if you have a house and you could only grow 1 tree, I would recommend the Mexican elderberry. It grows fast. It's used for spiritual purposes. It's used for medicinal purposes. It's used for music. You can close your eyes when elderberry is flowering and you can hear this plant. You can hear all the insects on the thousands of flowers. And when the fruits are ready, you have thousands of fruits. There's a gentleman who sells fresh Mexican elderberry, the native California elderberry at the Santa Monica Mountains. There's discussion about fresh elderberries being poisonous, and it's true for the non-native one. If you look online, most of the information is coming from the species that's grown in Europe or Central and Eastern United States. And it's true, if you guys happen to come across those, don't eat those raw. They're more black than the dusty blue that we have here in California. Those are poisonous in large amounts raw. Our native elderberry is not poisonous. You'd probably have to eat pounds and pounds and pounds of it, right? Like I said, there's a gentleman selling them raw in Santa Monica markets, and he probably would have been sued by now. So they're good raw. Where they really shine in is pies, in wines, in jellies. Some folks have a hard time processing them. A very easy way to process these, I'm gonna go back to a picture of the fruit. You can look at it's kind of hard to tell, but if you guys know this plant, there's a stem, and then there's smaller stems, and there's hundreds of fruits all on that little stem. So just put them in the freezer for a day. You take them out, and they're very easy just to knock off. They kind of just fall off the stem if it's cold enough, right? So leave them in there for 24 hours, and they knock right off, and then you can do whatever you want to with them. Apart from that, they are kind of hard to get off the stems. I'm going to speed up a little bit just because I want to get to all the plants. Again, if you guys have any questions, send them to Celeste. We can address them either here in the class or going forward through emails. Koion is one that I love. Not as easy to use as some of the other ones, but it's such a beautiful plant that I wanted to include it here. It's a very easy plant to grow. You can keep it as a hedge at 6 feet, or you can let it get to 20 feet tall as a small tree. Tons and tons of, probably per plant, thousands of individual fruits every year. Low water, needs almost no maintenance, grows everywhere in California. You want to taste the berry to make sure it's ripe. And it never gets super sweet. It never gets like, oh, come here and taste this, right? It's never like amazingly sweet. But we can use it in other recipes to either make it sweet so we can make jams out of it, or we can use it in yogurt. One of my favorites is just plain yogurt, like 5, 10, 15 Koions, and then a little bit of that Hummingbird Sage honey just to sweeten it up. It's amazing native yogurt, right? That has some of our ingredients, and you're eating California, which is the whole goal of this talk. And then there's a few interesting plants that I like to experiment with, or in my dreams I will work with in the future. So a lot of them are these native berries. Just to give you a heads up, the place I used to work at called Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden, they do occasionally sell a hybrid of two barberries. The Nevins barberry, which is really spiky and has a tiny fruit, but the fruit's very, very sweet. And if you combine that with Berberis aquifolium, which has a big fruit, but it's not sweet at all, it's really, really tart. So there's a hybrid at Rancho Santa Ana that incorporates the both, a bigger fruit, no seed, really sweet, right? So it's a really interesting hybrid, and it's a gorgeous plant. When I first saw it, I don't think it had been watered in 3 or 4 years. It was producing a large crop and looked, and more importantly, it looked like an amazing landscape plant, probably about 6 or 7 feet tall, about 7 feet wide, just a good looking plant. So there's some of those plants out there if you're willing to experiment. Another one that's interesting, very, very small fruit, but a really cool plant. I know a lot of people like goji berry. The genus or the scientific name for goji berry is Lycium. We have a few Lyciums here in California. This is one from, I believe, the Channel Islands. Yeah, from the Channel Islands in the desert. This is a really sweet, cool little fruit. It's just tiny, but it's a cool plant to grow in case you want to grow your own native goji berries. One that I love is saltbush. This is related to quinoa. There are male and female salt bushes. So if you grow this, you want to make sure you get a male and a female so you can get fruits. But what I like to do with these is I like to take the whole fruit. So that hand right there has fruit. So there's seed inside of those fruits, right? When they clean quinoa, they take, which this is related to, they take the seed outside of the fruit. That's too much work for me. I don't have a processor like that. That takes processing. But what I've done is just harvest the fruits off the plant, right? And so you have a bunch of fruits, hundreds, if not thousands, very easy to collect. And then you boil it down for about 20 to 40 minutes. I'm still trying to figure out the right way to do it. It's naturally salty. And if you do it correctly, you have this soft, almost quinoa-like, I guess, rice substitute. And if you want to get hardcore, we have roasted quail on top of your native saltbush with a little bit of the Cleveland Sage Pesto. And we were able to serve that one time at Rancho Santa Ana. And it's none of these are foods, at least for the moment, that we're going to do every day. But these are things that for those of us who want to look into the future while using the present, this is what we should start using, right, and promoting. There's a few other things like native chia that we would like to promote the use of. Native chia is much more different than the Salvia hispanica, which is the chia you can buy for like $2 a pound. Our native chia costs about $100 a pound. It's ridiculous how expensive it is, and you can't buy it at the store. It's just not grown in quantities. Most of it's harvested in the wild or in very small plots. What we'd like to do is start promoting the use of this, mostly by native folks. They want to go out and collect the old way. There's songs, there's rituals, there's methods to collecting that are either stored away or broken up and partly lost. And so they want to get back to these ways. So we want to promote the use of chia again and the collecting of chia, right? Those traditions around it. And other things like the pine nuts that are growing wild in much of the area between Riverside and Las Vegas in the upper elevation areas. There's lots of food out there that it would be interesting to get folks to develop an industry around. Instead of buying our pine nuts from China, there's, thousands and thousands of pounds of pine nuts in our local mountains out there. It would be interesting to create a more sustainable local resource for. A few other ideas, the Slim Jim bean, which is a very, very drought tolerant bean, and verdolagas, which is purslane. Turns out both of those are native, not the purslane as a weed, but there's some purslane found in Eastern California in upper elevation that is native, and it's one of the healthiest greens in the whole world. The Slim Jim bean is being used, the genetics of it's being used to grow and to create more drought tolerant beans. So there's stuff being used from California, and it's really, really a cool, beautiful thing that's happening. And one that's one of my favorites, and definitely not something that you would use every day, is the brodea, which we use as a potato. And then there's some native shrubs in the desert called oreganillo, which has a very citrusy, almost grapefruit smell, and oregano taste. It's a really, really nice oregano substitute, just wild, native, low water, even though oregano is, you know, very low water too, not native, but low water. And so, of course, going forward, I urge you guys to use all these plants with respect, knowing that they have a long history. And I think if we can go about things respectfully, that's usually a much better way. So I encourage you guys to use these, whatever we can share with you, recipes and talks and plants, with enthusiasm, but with respect, knowing that these have been here for a long time. And what a farmer's market of native fruit and foods might look like as a stand. On the left, all the fresh stuff that a farmer or a grower might bring, miner's lettuce, hummingbird sage leaves, all the fresh fruits that we talked about, native onions, etc. And on the right side, stuff that you might prepare on your own, sage pesto, acorn paste, manzanita cider, stuff that I didn't get into. I didn't get into acorns or prunus using the native cherry as a hummus substitute, because there's a lot of work involved. I wanted to just get into stuff that you guys could right now basically hang up Zoom, if you guys haven't already, and just start using them in your daily lives, right? But there's a lot that could be used. And hopefully this is what farmers markets start to look like in the next 10, 20 years. And then if you did have a native food, maybe if you worked at a botanic garden, or if you have a large garden, what would a native food display look like? Definitely vineyards, small rows of, instead of blueberry, vaccinium, which is the huckleberry, you know, wild areas for native bulbs like onions and triteleas, the potatoes. And in that same area, you could grow chia. There's a lot of potential, I think, for small gardens, even like LA Arboretum and smaller gardens, even at your own community garden, to do a lot of native plants in one place. And so I just want to encourage you guys to look these resources up. On the top, there's a new, fairly new restaurant that opened up. I don't know what the situation is with them right now because of COVID, but they were open up 2 to 3 days a week on a very limited basis, producing amazing, like small scale food. Heyday Books is a great resource for not just native books, but a lot of books about California. I encourage you guys to look up the agave roast at the Malky Museum, where every year they open up their reservation and they let folks come out and harvest native agaves with them on one Saturday, and the next Saturday they invite you back out to eat the roasted agave. It's a beautiful thing to do with your family. It's a beautiful March tradition, just to get centered what March is, right? To be in California. March for many people, native people in Southern California, is agave time, right? And there's my email right in the middle, antoniosanchez@samuelfund.org. We do have free plants that we're starting to promote giving away through the national parks to get these plants out into people's gardens. We want to encourage you guys to eat them and to use them for landscaping. And there's a native food website, a conference that a lot of us did about 5 years ago. The link is right there at the bottom, canativefood.wordpress.com. You can see all the speakers that were there. And then there's a link to the recipes as well. And apart from that, I just want to give thank you again, most importantly, to Native folks who are willing to share their stuff, who have been cultivating all these ideas, all these practices for hundreds, if not thousands of years. All the botanic gardens and nurseries that I've gotten to work with and other people have worked with, Rancho Santa Ana, the California Native Plant Society, Dr. Naomi Fraga, who's a close friend and who helped me develop this talk, the Chia Cafe, and Jessica Orozco, who's now passed away, Chia on the other side. And my challenge to you, if you are in a position to, is to, if you plan on being here in California, to eat California, if you can afford it. Sometimes it's not easy, but to incorporate in a small way some of this food into your diet. It's a beautiful thing to do. And if we're gonna live California, we should be California, right? And so with that, there's a few credits for photos at the end. Again, this PowerPoint is up for grabs if you guys would like. And I think with that, Celeste, if there's any questions, I think we got time to take a few. Celeste, you there? Let's see. I'm gonna go on the chat real quick, and I'm gonna see if I can find some stuff here. Let's see. It says this, I want my money back. This was a horrible talk. Horrible talk, want my money back. Okay, I don't want that negativity. PowerPoint, thank you so much. Okay, let me check this one out. What is your recommendation for a starter plant when you live in San Fernando Valley? That's a great question. That's a very deep question. If we're talking about food, San Fernando Valley, let's distinguish full sun or part shade. San Fernando's brutal, hot out there. So are you doing full sun or part shade? If you're doing full sun, real quick recommendation for food would be the Cleveland Sage hybrid. That loves sun, it works in Phoenix, so easy to grow. You can drown it with water. You won't have a problem growing it. You really only need to water every 10 days to keep it producing leaves, but easy to grow. If you have part shade, I would do those 3 golden currants, and you should be fine. There's a lot more that I could share too, but that would be a good starter. Let's see. A lot of people looking for the presentation, people looking for refunds. No refunds on a free class, sorry. I asked about the name of the native potato to eat with the allium. Cool. So the native potato, the only native potato that I've tried is on the top, right? And it's Tritolea. I believe the species is Ixioides. Let me go back to the talk. Yeah, Ixioides. So Tritolea, Ixioides. And let me share my screen so you guys can see it. Maybe it is right. Anyway, Tritolea Ixioides. That's it right there. Can you guys see that? I don't know if you can see that, but that's the one that I've used the bulb of, or the corm of, as a potato. They're small. This is, I'm developing as I get older, and as my life gets, more, we have more experiences. I like the idea more of a not just a food garden, but a ceremony garden. And a ceremony garden for me is a garden that you use and that gives you stuff at certain times a year, and maybe only every 2 or 5 years. So the Tritolea is something you would not want to harvest very often, once a year at the most, because it just doesn't produce very aggressively. It doesn't produce a ton of stuff. Not like elderberry, not like grapes. Those things are weeds. They'll give you stuff. Not like hummingbird sage. They'll give you food all the time. But there's a beautiful plant like Yucca whipplei, or it's called Our Lord's Candle, that only flowers once in its life and then dies. As it flowers, it produces a stalk that looks like an artichoke. I'm sorry, an asparagus. And if you cut it at the right time, you can eat that raw, and it tastes like jicama. It's really, really good. But that's only once in its life, right? So there's things that we can put in our garden that maybe will flower just once a year or produce a very small amount of food once a year. And those would be things that we would want to tie certain ceremonies or certain celebrations around. So I'm in no way promoting the use of Tritolea ixioides as a large-scale native food. I am promoting it for you to grow either by the seed or by the dried corm, grow it in your garden, and then have a small patch of it for you to use for special occasions, right? I'm so bad at Zoom that I don't know where the chat is anymore. Oh, here it is. Is this it? PowerPoint, I want my money back. I want my money back. Lots of refund questions. Is hummingbird sage a similar taste to other sages? Oh, that's a good question. No, not at all. So hummingbird sage, if you guys know, there's a non-native sage called pineapple sage. I've never tried pineapple sage, but the smell of pineapple sage is very similar to the smell of hummingbird sage. It almost smells tropical. If you smell hummingbird sage, it almost smells like it shouldn't be in California, right? It smells very sweet, very tropical. That's the best way. The other native sages are, on the other side, more like, they don't taste like rosemary, but think about what pineapple would taste like and what rosemary tastes like. Way different, right? So the other sages, which are more bushy, are more oily, more intense. They have, I think, they're more kind of like the drought tolerance. So hummingbird sage is really the only one I would use for sweetness. And then the Cleveland sage or the hybrids are what I would use for the pesto and for the olive oil flavorings, right? There's another question right here. Which plants would be better to start as seeds or as seedlings? That's an excellent question. Where would I recommend buying plants? There's a great small nursery in El Sereno called Artemisia Nursery. I would recommend getting some plants from them. They have a great nursery. You could hit us up, and we're promoting the use of some of our plants, right, as giveaways. Artemisia Nursery is a great a resource. I would always, if you can, try to buy small plants. The only seed that I would grow would be the corms or the bulbs, like the onion, the tritolea, the potato, and then the miner's lettuce. Those are going to be probably easier for you from seed. And then native seed is just a little bit of tricky to grow, to do sometimes. So I would try to buy all the other ones like in 4-inch, right? Like the elderberry, which we're giving away, the golden currant, just so much easier to just buy the small plant if you can afford it, right? What is the clue to IDing miner's lettuce when it's not blooming? That's a good question. So that's an excellent question. Who's that? Kelly? But Kelly's got some good questions. So Kelly, one of the ways to do it is to go to just cheat and pretend you got a PhD and just go to CalFlora, and you can look on the CalFlora website for miner's lettuce and go to a small button called Cal Photos, and it's going to link you to dozens of pictures of the plant. So miner's lettuce, when it's not flowering, it's really interesting, the leaves. It almost looks like a small, narrow green tongue, the leaf. And then once it starts to flower, it has these really interesting, like almost like lily pad type leaves, right? So they're round instead of like tongue. But if you just go to CalFlora and then type in miner's lettuce or the scientific name for miner's lettuce, then go to Cal Photos, it'll show you a bunch. Probably trying it is not a good idea because there's a lot of poisonous plants out there. So don't just try, and if you die, then you'll know that it wasn't miner's lettuce, right? Don't do that. Make sure you have the miner's lettuce before you eat it. Michelle, ¿qué pasó, Michelle? I don't know if she's still on. I've been having trouble growing Hummingbird Sage for seed. Advice, yes, stop growing it from seed. It's hard. No, so Hummingbird Sage is a really interesting plant. That would be a good one to make jewelry out of and to make decorative stuff out of. The seed is gorgeous. So I have found, and I think a lot of people have found, Hummingbird Sage seed, for whatever reason, maybe because it's so big, it's really fat compared to the other sage, really gets eaten by insects a lot. I find it all the time. You go to collect Hummingbird Sage seed in the wild or in your garden, and it's almost always has insects, has holes in it. So maybe, Michelle, you're not using good seed, right? It may just be bad seed. It may have been eaten by insects. The second one is a lot of sages don't set very good seed to begin with. Sometimes 30 to 50% of the sage seed, only 30 to 50% of sage seed is good, right? So if you have 10 seeds, only 3 to 5 of them are actually viable, right? So make sure you got good seed, sow a lot of it. And if you've been having trouble with it, soak it in water overnight, warm water overnight, let it get fat, let it take in the water overnight, and then bury it just as deep as the seed is, just barely bury it. And then keep it lightly watered. If you're growing it like in part shade, you would want to water it every 2 to 4 days. If it's good seed and it's 75 degrees, it should wake up pretty quick. Should any of these plants be avoided if you are pregnant? Ashley, congratulations. That's so cool. COVID baby. Ashley, I don't even want to pretend that I know the answer to that. Most of these have been eaten. I don't see how, I don't want to give you any incorrect advice because being pregnant is a gorgeous thing and I would not want to interfere with that. I mean, people have been eating this stuff for years. I don't see how the miner's lettuce is a problem. I don't see how the sage is a problem. The grape obviously would not be a problem. The currants would not be a problem, right? Currants are eaten all over the world. I would watch out for elderberry, where we know it could be, we don't want to eat elderberry in large quantities when it's green. And we know Koion has some toxic properties if you eat a ton of it. So I would stay close, like the onions should be fine. Basically anything that's closely related to stuff that we already eat on a daily basis, I think you're going to be fine with, Ashley. And a great way to look is the scientific name of sage is salvia. So you might want to look online, are salvias poisonous? or our salvia is good for pregnant women, and then they should have a good answer right there. Celeste, can I keep answering some of these questions, or do you want to call it?
I think that as long as people want to hang out and listen to their questions be answered,
Okay.
keep it rolling. And if anybody's got a jam, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you guys. Send me an email if you like. Stay tuned with Celeste. I'm hoping to do more classes. We did a plant propagation class, so we did cuttings and seed about 2 months ago, and we're hoping to do more propagation classes. So please stay tuned. The next one is, can we grow purple sage in pots? Yes, purple sage is super easy to grow in pot. I would recommend, so I don't know if you should be able to see that. So nothing, I don't like to go too deep. So maybe about as deep as this pot, or maybe like something that we call like a 4-inch to start off with. If you're gonna grow something in a pot, remember it's gonna always need food. People usually forget to feed stuff in pots. Our native plants very rarely need any fertilizer or food in the ground, right? Because they're so good at pulling it from the ground, from the clay soil that we usually have. But in pots, they don't have access to the clay soil. They have access to the crappy compost. I mean, compost is great, but they eat the compost stuff in months. And the wood and the perlite and the sand has no nutrients. And so a lot of people after 3 months starve their plants in pots. So purple sage is super easy to water. The best advice I can give you is, you know when to water it when you can pick up the pot and it feels light. That's when it's time to water. You can do that. And then make sure to feed it every 3 to 6 months, and it should be super, super easy. I don't think I see, let's see, I'm in the San Fernando Valley as well. Very interested in connecting with whoever asked about the easy to grow plant. Yes, cool. We'll send that contact over. If anybody has any other questions, I think I hit them all. Myers lettuce, sages, thank you very much. What do you think, Celeste?
I think you got them.
Okay.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thanks everybody. Thanks so much for joining this afternoon. I will follow up by email and send the PowerPoint out to everyone. I'll include Antonio's email. I'll include the offer from Brenda at Theodore Payne. And any other follow-up questions, reach out to me, reach out to Antonio. We'll continue the conversation. Thanks everyone so much. And thank you so much, Antonio. This was great. Thank you for taking over. You don't even need me. It's awesome.
All right, Celeste. Hopefully we'll see you soon, okay?
All right. Bye, everybody.
Take care. We'll see you.